"You're scaring the clients. This isn't a horror movie," laughs arrogant art director Julian Thorne, kicking Marcus Holloway out of the VFX studio because of the burn scars covering his face. He thinks Marcus is just a wandering vagrant, ruining the lobby's aesthetic. But he has no idea that the scarred man he just humiliated is the Abyssal, the legendary secret coder who built the physics engine for James Cameron's movies. Watch the shock of a lifetime when James Cameron arrives, ignores the director, and bows to the scarred man who saved his film. Subscribe for powerful stories where the underestimated rise and justice is undeniable. The lobby of Horizon VFX in Los Angeles was designed to intimidate. It was a cathedral of glass, polished concrete, and ego, a space where the air conditioning was always set to a shivering 68 degrees, and the silence was heavy with the scent of ambition. Every surface reflected the carefully curated image of the studio, sleek, futuristic, and flawless. Posters of blockbuster movies lined the walls, testaments to the studio's dominance in the industry. But amidst this perfection, Marcus Holloway sat on a low, uncomfortable bench near the service elevator, trying to make himself disappear. Marcus was a large black man in his late 40s, dressed in a faded black hoodie and cargo pants that had seen better days. He kept the hood pulled up, casting a shadow over his face, but it couldn't hide the truth. The left side of his face, from his hairline down to his neck, was a landscape of jagged raised keloid scars. The skin was twisted and discolored, a permanent record of a server room fire 10 years ago, where he had stayed behind to manually back up the data for a project that went on to win an Academy Award. He wasn't there for praise. He was there because the rendering farm for James Cameron's latest underwater epic had crashed, and the code was so complex that only the original architect could fix it. Marcus was that architect, known in the digital underground only as the Abyssal. He worked remotely, lived in solitude, and avoided mirrors. Today, however, the crisis required a physical connection to the mainframe. He had been summoned, but the man approaching him across the lobby didn't know about the code. He only knew about the image. Julian Thorne, the studio's newly promoted creative director, marched across the atrium with the click-clack of expensive Italian loafers. Julian was the embodiment of Hollywood superficiality, a sharp suit, perfectly coiffed hair, and a smile that never reached his cold, calculating eyes. He viewed the studio not as a place of creation, but as a showroom for his own brilliance. When his eyes landed on Marcus, his lip curled in immediate, visceral disgust. To Julian, Marcus wasn't a person. He was a glitch, a horrifying aesthetic error in Julian's perfect lobby. Julian stopped 3 feet from Marcus, refusing to come closer as if the scars were contagious. He looked around to ensure no important clients were witnessing this visual pollution. He snapped his fingers aggressively, demanding Marcus's attention. Marcus looked up slowly, exposing the full extent of the burn scarring under the harsh lobby lights. Julian flinched, taking a step back, his face twisting into a mask of revulsion. He spoke in a low, venomous hiss, his hands gesturing wildly toward the exit. He told Marcus that this was a place of beauty, a place where dreams were made, not a dungeon for monsters. He asked if Marcus was lost, or perhaps delivering a package to the wrong address, implying that someone with his face belonged in a warehouse, not a creative sanctuary. Marcus stood up, towering over the slim director. He reached into his pocket to pull out the encrypted key card he had been sent, the one that proved he belonged there. But Julian slapped his hand away before he could produce it. Julian accused him of reaching for a weapon, his prejudice filling in the gaps of his ignorance. He called security over his shoulder, his voice rising in pitch. He shouted that there was a vagrant in the lobby, a man who was scaring the receptionists and ruining the studio's vibe. He pointed at Marcus's face and made a cruel comment about how they weren't filming a horror movie today, so the special effects makeup wasn't needed. The humiliation washed over Marcus, hot and familiar. He had saved this studio millions of dollars over the years. He had solved physics simulations that baffled PhDs, but in this moment, none of that mattered. He was just a scarred black man in a hoodie, being treated like garbage by a man who couldn't code "Hello World" in Python. The security guards, recognizing Julian's authority but looking uncomfortable, approached Marcus. Julian ordered them to take Marcus to the back alley, to the loading dock where the trash was collected, and to keep him there until he decided whether to call the police for trespassing. Marcus looked at Julian. He didn't argue, he didn't scream, he simply nodded, a look of profound pity in his eyes for a man so hollow. He allowed the guards to guide him toward the service exit, his head lowered once more. He accepted the erasure. He was used to it. He walked away from the cool air of the lobby into the stifling heat of the loading dock, leaving Julian to adjust his cuffs and preen in his reflection, satisfied that he had cleansed his domain of ugliness. 30 minutes later, the atmosphere in the lobby shifted from serene to chaotic. A convoy of black SUVs screeched to a halt at the curb, ignoring the no-stopping signs. The doors flew open, and a team of assistants spilled out, looking terrified. Then James Cameron emerged. He wore khaki trousers and a simple black t-shirt, looking less like a billionaire director and more like a general arriving at a losing battlefield. He stormed into the lobby, his presence sucking the oxygen out of the room. He was furious. The rendering for the water physics, the crown jewel of his new film, was broken. The release date was in jeopardy. Billions were on the line. Julian Thorne saw his opportunity. He sprinted forward, intercepting Cameron with a dazzling, sycophantic smile. He extended his hand, launching into a rehearsed speech about how honored they were, how perfect the facility was, how he personally was overseeing the aesthetic direction of the project. He tried to guide Cameron toward the VIP lounge, offering espresso, offering a tour of the art department, trying to distract the legendary director with surface-level beauty. Cameron didn't even slow down. He walked right through Julian's personal space, ignoring the outstretched hand. He wasn't looking at the art on the walls. He wasn't looking at Julian's suit. He was looking at his tablet, where a stream of error codes was scrolling rapidly. He barked a single question into the air, demanding to know where the Abyssal was. He shouted that he had sent for the only person on the planet who understood the fluid dynamics engine, and he wanted him at a terminal 10 minutes ago. Julian blinked, confused. He stammered that he didn't know any Abyssal, but assured Cameron that their lead in-house team was the best in the business. Cameron stopped and turned on Julian with the force of a hurricane. He told Julian that his in-house team were children playing with crayons compared to the man he needed. He described the coder, reclusive, brilliant, the ghost who built the backbone of the industry, He asked if a man had arrived, a man who might look rough, a man who kept to himself. Julian's face went pale. A realization began to dawn on him, cold and terrifying. He remembered the man in the hoodie, the man with the scars, the man he had thrown out like trash. He tried to lie. He tried to say that no such person had arrived. But the head of security, standing by the door, cleared his throat. He pointed toward the service exit. He muttered that they had removed a man earlier, at Mr. Thorne's request. Cameron followed the guard's finger. He didn't ask for permission. He didn't wait. He marched toward the service doors, kicking one open with a violence that rattled the frame. Julian scrambled after him, terrified, trying to come up with an excuse, trying to frame it as a security precaution. They burst onto the loading dock. The sun was blinding. There, sitting on a stack of wooden pallets near the dumpster, was Marcus. He was typing on a small, battered laptop balanced on his knees, calmly working on a fragment of code, despite the heat and the smell of refuse. Cameron stopped. He looked at Marcus. He saw the hoodie. He saw the scars glinting in the sunlight, and his expression softened from rage to profound relief. He walked over to Marcus, ignoring Julian, ignoring the trash on the ground. He didn't look at Marcus with disgust. He looked at him with reverence. Cameron spoke to Marcus, his voice dropping to a respectful, almost brotherly tone. He asked if Marcus had found the glitch. Marcus didn't stand up. He didn't bow. He simply turned the laptop screen toward the famous director and pointed to a line of code. He nodded. He had fixed the compression algorithm while sitting next to a dumpster. Julian Thorne arrived, breathless and sweating. He tried to intervene, tried to save the situation. He laughed nervously, saying that he was glad they found this vagrant, and that he would have security remove him now so they could get to work. He gestured at Marcus's face, whispering to Cameron that this man was disturbing, that his appearance wasn't right for the client-facing areas. Cameron stood up slowly. He turned to Julian. The look he gave the creative director was one of absolute annihilation. Cameron pointed at Marcus's scars. He asked Julian if he knew how Marcus got them. Julian shook his head, mute with fear. Cameron's voice boomed across the loading dock. He told the story of the fire at the data center 10 years ago. He told how everyone else ran, but Marcus stayed. He told how Marcus shielded the hard drives with his own body while the ceiling melted, saving the digital soul of the biggest movie in history. He said that those scars weren't ugly. They were medals. They were proof of a dedication that a man like Julian, in his pristine suit, could never comprehend. Cameron stepped closer to Julian, invading his space. He told Julian that the movie industry wasn't built by people who looked good in suits. It was built by people who bled for the art. He pointed at Marcus and said, "He is the movie. You are just the rapper." Then came the verdict. Cameron turned to his producer, who had followed the group outside. He pointed at Julian. He demanded that Julian be removed from the project immediately. He said he refused to work with anyone who couldn't see the value of a diamond because it was wrapped in rough paper. He told the studio head, who had just arrived, that if Julian wasn't fired and escorted off the lot in 5 minutes, he would pull the production and take it to Weta Digital. Julian stood there, his career evaporating in the California sun. He looked at Marcus, really looked at him for the first time. He saw the intelligence in Marcus's eyes, the quiet dignity that he had mistaken for weakness. Marcus didn't sneer. He didn't gloat. He simply closed his laptop, stood up, and brushed the dust off his pants. Cameron put a hand on Marcus's shoulder, the same shoulder Julian had recoiled from. He didn't ask Marcus to follow him. He gestured for Marcus to lead the way. "After you, boss," the billionaire director implied with his body language. Marcus walked past Julian without saying a word. He walked back through the service doors, through the lobby where he had been shamed, and toward the main server room. The staff watched in stunned silence as James Cameron, the king of the world, walked a step behind the scarred man in the hoodie, asking him questions about physics simulations and listening to the answers like a student, listening to a master. Julian Thorne was left alone on the loading dock, the smell of garbage mixing with the scent of his expensive cologne. He watched the door close, shutting him out of the future, leaving him in the past where he belonged. Inside, Marcus sat down at the main terminal. He typed a command. The screens wall to wall lit up with the deep, bioluminescent blue of an underwater world. The simulation stabilized. The water flowed perfectly. The magic was back. James Cameron smiled, patted Marcus on the back, and the work began. The scars on Marcus's face caught the blue light of the screens, and in that moment, they didn't look like wounds. They looked like maps to a world only he could create.